Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Redefining Everything, where everything is up for discussion. And I am so grateful today that I have the opportunity to connect with Tonya. And what's so beautiful, I was trying to think, actually, we didn't even chat about this. We've been in each other's spheres online for a few years now. And I remember you reached out to me and connected because we both share well, I was going to say similar. I think our journeys actually have been different, but we have both made similar decisions around alcohol. And I think you reached out to me because of that, but also because you live in Mexico and I live in Mexico. And, we just had a hard time for various reasons connecting at that moment. And of course, with divine timing being what it is, we landed even more, I think, in each other's spheres. Recently, when I was watching a live that you were doing on the topic, specifically on the topic of redefining, which I had already decided to do this conversation series on. So we're going to go a lot more into that in the next few minutes, but I'd love to hear from you. Who are you? How you show up in the world? What do you want us to know about you?
Okay, well, thank you again, beloved Caitlin, for having me on. I'm so honored to be a part of this conversation and a sacred conversation. And so I'm Tana Gonzalez. I started out my life and my journey really as a librarian. I've always been a seeker. And so I start there with my story because the librarian in me really wanted me to dig into deeper who I was. And then my natural gifts as a psychic and a medium really influenced the books in the course of my life, which then landed me as a yoga teacher. And so I thought I was going to be this amazing new woman of color yoga teacher traveling all over the world. Well, the universe said, wait a minute, we got something better in store for you. And so I started reading tarot cards at a coffee shop in Chicago. And within 3 years, I was voted #3 psychic in the world and competing in the International Psychic Challenge in Kiev, Ukraine. And so I went from, coffee shop to TV star. And even while that happened, Caitlin, I was waitressing in Key West. I was a busboy in a restaurant. I had all these grunt jobs because I said, I'm working at the beach. I'm working at the beach. I'm 40 years old. I'm doing my thing. My daughter's in college. And sure, I was having fun. I was drinking too much. And then something told me I needed to do something else. Like I had to get out of here. Key West, again, is a tourist town. And I was drinking just too much. And so the universe whisked me off to Kiev to be on a TV show. And I drank even heavier there.
I've been in the Ukraine.
Yeah, I drank even heavier there because the Ukrainians are very heavy drinkers.
Yeah.
And so I just fit right in. I had no spiritual support. I had nobody. I had myself in a hotel room for 8 months while I was on TV. And so then I came back to the United States and I was by myself and had to sink back in, and I drank more again because I had been so used to it. And I was again living alone, nobody that I had to check balances with. And then things happened. And of course, life just took me through this experience of letting go. And I said no, and letting go. And I said no, and letting go. And I said no. And finally, I was in Marbella, Spain, one of the most beautiful places in the world. At this beautiful exclusive nightclub that I had been going to every night for like months at a time. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to kill myself if I don't stop. And I said, I want to change. And within a week, I was on a plane back to Chicago. And my mother also was an everyday drinker, which is where I learned that habit. And in that experience, I decided to quit drinking. And I said, I know Spirit has another plan for me. And so there was this, I'm a teacher and a student of A Course in Miracles, as well as a licensed spiritual counselor. And so there was this cartoon I saw, and it was a picture of Jesus and a little girl. And this little girl had this little teddy bear, and Jesus had behind his back this big, huge teddy bear. And he had his hand out. And when I saw that, I said, that is it. I'm the little girl holding on to the little teddy bear. And just this voice, the sacred voice said to me, look, wait till you see what's on the other side. Do you know how powerful you are? Do you know what is within you? And I said, I'll try it. I'll do it. I'll do it for 30 days. And then 30 turned into 60 and then 90. And then I stopped counting. And the day I stopped counting, I was like, I don't remember what day it is anymore. I don't remember what day it is anymore, because I remember I was so focused on the day and the number of days, which kept me hooked to the experience. But how I let go is I asked. I said, Holy Spirit, God, universe, I don't know what I'm doing. I've been doing this since I was 14 years old. I let go. I surrender. I don't want this anywhere in my mind. I forgot half of it anyway. So take the rest of it away. Take the desire from me to hurt myself. Let me love myself instead. And that's who I am. That's who I am. And as a spiritual teacher, as a spiritual healer, as a bruja, as an author, as the wife, a mother, a sister. So that's who I am.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I know, there's so much more to your journey. But something that when you were sharing about it recently, because it was recently your 3-year anniversary, but who's counting? No, I know. And I love that about feeling free from counting the days, but I think anniversaries are important, markers to honor our, the shift, when such a significant shift happened. And, something I've been thinking about a lot recently, and I don't know if this was similar for you, but when you were drinking, I know for me, I would chase that feeling of losing my consciousness. Like I would chase that feeling of being able to let go. And something that just I keep repeating it. So somebody said it in a training I was at, and it just has been this refrain for me, even recently, that I value my consciousness too much now to give it away. And so when you talk about really honoring yourself with this choice, that is something, and then with your gifts that you have as a psychic and as a medium and as somebody who's deeply intuitive, I know for me, making the decision to not be intoxicated anymore and to not give away my consciousness or give away myself really in any kind of aspect. And you and I were talking about that before we started recording, that there were many ways that I used to do that. And I think you as well, through distractions, through work, through relationships that weren't sacred, and I'd love if you can talk a little bit about what that was for you, because obviously you were already really dialed in. I mean, you won, the third best psychic in the world. You had these TV opportunities. You obviously did have a pretty powerful channel that you were already working with. So what's the difference that you've seen in the past few years?
I just shared with you some things. We talked for 5 minutes, and I know my gift comes through to serve. It does not serve me unless I am serving it to others, and so it is so clear now. I don't think, I just say what I'm guided to say. I used to be so afraid. Is this really what's happening? Is this, true? Because people would come to me for very deep life experiences, death, divorce, all kinds of things. And I still doubted myself. And I said, I can no longer do that. And my gifts have increased so much in so many different ways. Like my hair, my afro is like an antenna. I feel like I just pick up every single thing in the world now, because that's what I asked for. I said, let me be used and serve my gift. And so it's writing books, it's doing interviews, it's, hosting free book clubs and spiritual groups. It's supporting others as I support myself, truly, in a deeper way. So thank you for letting me share it yet again.
Yeah. And something else that you said was, we can't think our way through healing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because I think I know I see it a lot, and both with my clients, but also I've realized very recently in the past year or so that there are many things that I had an intellectual understanding of. You know, I've been in and out of therapy since I was 13. I could tell you what my issues were. um, but actually feeling them and allowing them to be in my body and then move through my body and doing that kind of embodied healing is, I would say, there's times where I was forced to do that, probably by, like, I couldn't ignore my body anymore. So then I'd be like, okay, I'll pay attention to you for a while, or I couldn't ignore my soul anymore, you know? And so it was like, okay, you know, fine, you know, but this sort of deeper integration that's been happening for me recently, has been this really interesting experience of the difference between reading something. For example, I've mentioned this in another conversation I was having. It's like the difference between reading something like one of the memes and being like, oh, that's cute, like that's a nice meme, I'm going to repost it, versus actually being moved to tears, or having this sort of sensory or embodied experience around, like, whoa, I get that, like I get it, my cells understand what that means or what that experience is. And sometimes it can be kind of overwhelming, because I do cry more, or I feel things more in my body. And it requires, I think, a certain amount of gentleness on a daily basis in order to be that dialed in to what this experience of life is. But also when memories come up, when experience, you know, when I'm not just, you know, triggered into a memory in terms of thinking about it, but actually feeling that experience. So that's what came to mind when I heard you say those words around, we can't think our way through our healing. But I'm wondering, for you and in your work, both for you personally and in your work, how does that show up for you?
Well, it's interesting because when I was in school to become a spiritual counselor, I was also in talk therapy with a woman who was getting into more spirituality. So we would have these very interesting conversations, but I knew that talk therapy does not work. It does not work because our bodies remember, our bodies hold on at the cellular level where we have trapped trauma, issues, experiences. And like you said yourself, sometimes we actually have to dive deep to see what, you know, your body has to get ill. You have to break down before you stop and say something's not right, you know? And so the senses, the body, how we get to the cellular level is through consistency. And like you said, we'll take a workshop and things like that. And that's why the thinking only works for a little while, because it only stays right here. We never let it truly come into ourselves. And ourselves. And so the two things that came to mind, first of all, is I am a student and a teacher of A Course in Miracles. For me, A Course in Miracles, the daily lessons have provided me the strength and the guidance. And tarot, my tarot cards are also I do them every day consistently. And they are an enrichment tool, a self-discovery tool of our, you know, psychological and archetypal experiences. And so all of that really is what I'll be sharing in my upcoming book, The Sensuous Bruja, because it's really about us connecting to our sensuous self. Like you said, we must connect our mind, body, and spirit. We can't just keep thinking, oh, I'm going to be spiritual, I'm going to light some candles. It's just like, just over the weekend, there's this, Sephora now is selling basic witch kits with some sage and a crystal and some perfume, and calling it, you know, a witch kit, where I've been studying this stuff my entire life. And it's not just burning sage and having a rose quartz candle or a crystal. And so this is the deeper layer. That's what embodiment is, because we've been taught to ignore ourselves. We've been only taught to be so effing smart, but we're not smart. We really don't know anything. And A Course in Miracles is my support in recognizing that I know nothing, and that if I let the sacred voice speak instead of the insane voice speak, then I am guided. and I am then provided. And so every way I need to go, I know that I am being supported. And wherever I go, whatever I do, even picking out my outfit, or how I'm doing my hair, I trust that I am supported. And so it's really the consistency of spiritual practice, whatever it looks like. And so, yeah, I love tarot for that reason. It's really kind of the blending the psychological, spiritual, and the personality, the ego self. What are you drawn to with the tarot? What deck do you like, kind of thing. And so yeah.
I love that. Well, I hadn't really thought about tarot in that way before, and that makes me even more curious to learn more about it. And I also love how you describe a spiritual practice, or like a daily practice of some form of connecting with yourself and also with the spiritual or with the sacred, whatever that means for you, but that needs to be something consistent that we take time for every single day. And the other thing that you mentioned, I'm really curious because I feel this is a topic that I've been really interested in, and yet we often still don't hear these words. I don't think in sort of like common speak to hear the word sacred and sensual or sensuous used together. And so like in some ways, even in some religions, I feel like those two are divorced, or we had this idea, that, I mean, you live in Mexico and I do too. And in terms of the Catholic teachings, or at least in how people have interpreted them, that there's really this like, well, if you're a spiritual woman, that you're kind of cut off from your sensual self. And that's true, I know, for many religions around the world. So I'd love to hear from you. What does it mean to be sacred and sensual? What is your sacred sensuality, or to be a sacred, spiritual, sensuous woman? You have a book coming out, which I'm super excited to read, but while we're here in the conversation, I'd love to hear from you what that means for you, and what,
we again think, and we think we know, but how do we experience? We experience through our senses. When we go out there and see the ocean, it is through our senses. But again, it's more than just what we see and smell and can touch. It goes deeper within. And that deeper within is where we connect to our sacred self. We can't connect to our sacred self with our eyes. Otherwise, we would see each other as the light beings that we are, instead of judging and wanting to control and fearing other people, which is what we do. And so we can't use these eyes to see our soul. We have to use our eyes and hear to see our soul. And how do we experience that? But through our extrasensory selves, our extrasensory sacred self. And we can only tune into that if we are aware of ourselves, if we are discovering of ourselves, if we are trying to know thyself. We can't get to that through, let me read a book, let me take a class. You have to turn inward. And we've been taught to never do that. Don't look at yourself. Try to compete, try to compare. Don't look at yourself. You're already messed up. Just keep trying to improve. And again, it's my spiritual practice that has taught me that, because I did not come from this life. I came from a single mother who did not love herself. And it has taken me years of healing that and myself to get to this place of understanding, but it has been my consistent spiritual practice that has got me here. And so when you blend your sensual self, that is in your personality, that is when you truly get your spirit. And then your spirit then merges into your soul once you get to that self-mastery level, which is what we're all here for. And so it's the levels of our growth and our expansion. We are here to grow and then flow and then glow. And if we stay in our flow and stay in our lane and do what we're meant to do, I am meant to be a psychic medium. I am meant to be a tarot teacher. I am meant to share this sacred message with women, blending their bruja-ness, because we all have that sacred womanness in us, for candles and incense and all of that. We love it. But yet we deny it from ourselves because we think, I don't have time. I got to give my family and give to others and give. But we don't allow ourselves to have any of that. I love my Haagen-Dazs ice cream. I love my flowers. I love my, I'm asking my husband for a massage. I know that pleasure must come first. And that's one of the first things that I talk about in the Sensuous Bruja are the pleasure principles. As women, we must allow ourselves our pleasure, because then we recognize our true sensuousness. It has nothing to do with this form. It is where we glow from. It is our inner light. And that is what I want to share with women in supporting their healing and supporting their journey.
It's so beautiful. And it actually makes me realize that I think as I have turned inward over the years and started loving myself more and treating myself differently, I have also become closer to God, and whereas when I was externalizing, and because we are God, right? And so, and I didn't get that for a really, really long time. And, and now something that I love is I can listen to different sermons or go to different churches. And with me, sort of with this knowledge that like God is love and I am God. And like, it almost doesn't really matter what they're saying. I feel like I always have a spiritual experience and I always receive something from the teachings, because I've gone to a few different churches where I live in Mexico, and I feel like, and somebody was asking me that, well, do you think it's weird? And you go to these different, churches and denominations and things like that. But I'm like, I always get something from it, whether it's being moved by a song or whether it's a part of the sermon, or even just sometimes it's a word that just lands. And I have that embodied experience of like, oh, I feel that, like I am that, And I didn't get that for so many years, and I think what you're speaking to is the experience of many women that we're afraid. We're taught to be afraid of ourselves. I think we don't.
We are.
Yeah.
We're taught to be not pretty enough, not stylish enough, not sexy enough. And where do we learn all these things? Where do we learn how to be sexy? Where do we learn how to be pretty? Not from, a lot of us have mothers who never learned it either, and then grandmothers who never learned it either, and then great grandmothers who never learned it either, and then we teach it to our daughters. Because where have we learned? Where have we been taught to love ourselves? Nowhere. And so it's important that we do this healing for ourselves, especially if we have daughters. Especially if we have daughters. My adult daughter lives with me, and it still teaches me, like right now it's the unbalancing the mother control and letting her just be an adult and experience what she needs to experience instead of don't do that, and I'm like, just bye, just done. But again, we have to go through it to learn it, and I catch myself and then I apologize to her because I say, what, I recognize that this is, but now that I'm aware of it, I catch it before it even comes out, before it happens. And if it does happen, I say, ooh, I forgot for a moment. I forgive myself. Can you forgive me? Because we do forget. And that's, again, why spiritual practice, having something to come back to. Because a lot of times we get hooked in and then we go in the spiral. Oh, darn, I did something bad again. Somebody's going to be mad. It's all judgment. And we just have to recognize that we are divine beings, even if we make mistakes, even if we mess up big time. As long as we recognize that there's a lesson to be learned and that we're willing to try again, that's how you break patterns. That's how you shift behaviors. That's how you heal yourself. It's through self-awareness, not through wisdom, but through this. And that's why you go into churches. It's beautiful because it doesn't matter how it comes in as long as it does. And when you get to the place of where you hear it, the sacred voice instead of the insane voice, then nothing else but looking outside is necessary, or opening your eyes is necessary to recognize that you have what you need right there within you. Today's lesson I'll share with you is lesson 246. And there's a line that says, let me not fail to recognize myself. If I love God, I must love myself.
Yeah, like that's it right there. And yet I feel like we could spend, it's so simple, hours, exactly. but we moved, like, where did we moved so far away from that. And I know your work is really powerful in this journey of helping us, you know, all find our way back home to ourselves. And I just think that's so, so beautiful and such a gift. And I love that, you know, you've started using the words, I think very intentionally around, you know, this sort of sacred sensuality, because that's really, when we think about who we are as women, you know, we are the sacred and the sensual, and the permission to embody those parts of ourselves, because really embodying those parts of ourselves is the highest form of love we can give ourselves, is to love ourselves as women and in these bodies. And, you know, I'm really excited. How can we find more about your book?
Well, right now it's available for pre-sale at www.tarotlifecoach.com. It's also available on Publishizer, and all of that is there. Where else is it? I'm actually switching over my website in the next few days. So you can also find it at Tonya, TONYAR Gonzalez.com. So I'll be switching my website in the next few days. And so
Perfect. Well, by the time this is public, it'll probably be at TanyaGonzalez.com. And I'll make sure we include all the links, Benny, in the show notes for this, and on the various channels that we're going to be sharing it, because I think that I'm excited to read it. And I know that others listening to this will be as well. So just to wrap up, is there anything else that you wanted to share? I feel like this is definitely going to be a to be continued conversation, and hopefully we'll meet in person one day in Mexico.
Let's do it. Let's plan a date. And so, yeah. I just want, you know, everyone who listens to know that you are not alone. That's another thing. We think we're so alone. We think that nobody can understand us, that we're so messed up, that we're so damaged. And I had that story going on for the longest time. And it took the decision to love myself more than I loved alcohol that changed my life and that healed me. So listen to what your spirit is saying. It could be a relationship, a place, a job, but listen to yourself and read Women Who Run with the Wolves, and to get you where you need to be. And then buy your copy of the Sensuous Bruja. Thank you again, beloved, for allowing me to be here today with your breath.
Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll put all the info so that you can get in touch with Tonya. And if you have any more questions or you want us to continue this conversation, I'm sure would welcome another opportunity to get together and keep chatting. So definitely reach out to me or to Tonya and let us know if there was anything that you wanted to hear more about during this conversation, or if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. And I love you. I think you're amazing. I was reading your shirt at the beginning when we first went live, but less talk, more action. I love that too.
Yeah, that's it. We've got to listen more. That's another lesson from A Course in Miracles. It says, listen, learn, do.
Mm-hmm.
Be a happy learner. Be a happy learner. That's all we're here to be. Happy learners.
Yeah. Beautiful. And I just noticed on my clock it's 11:11 right now. So I feel like that's
Make a wish.
Yeah.
Make a wish. Yes, thank you.
Auspicious time to be wrapping up this conversation. Lots of love to you, and we'll keep
you too, beloved.
We'll stay in conversation. Bye.
Bye-bye.